Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to ask, how many historical wargamers are there? So this is entirely my own fault. I started thinking about this question and I've read a couple of things online, and then I went down the rabbit hole, and I couldn't help myself, and I wondered, I was speculating, how many historical wargamers are there in the UK? Now I appreciate that obviously some of my viewers are from overseas. This is very much a UK based question, but it was nonetheless, it's something that like sort of gripped my attention, and I drilled down and found lots of competing information. You know, I've often described our community as being a niche within a bigger niche, which is itself within an even bigger niche, which is the gaming industry. But is it even possible to speculate how many of us historical wargamers there are? So today's video is one of those that's sort of born out of a train of thought that turned into an obsessive hunt for data, any data that could possibly help to answer what started out as a seemingly simple question. And what I found is that the answer is not all simple, is full of assumptions, and it ends up pretty much being meaningless, just plucking a number out of the air. So follow me down the rabbit hole as I discuss what I found, or perhaps more accurately, what I didn't find. So quite naturally, I thought that maybe things like marketing data, sales data that might be available online would tell us something about the size of our hobby. And you know, the most recent market research I found online suggests that the current worldwide tabletop games market, so that includes board games, RPGs, all sorts of wargaming, was somewhere in the region of $2.4 billion in 2021. So that's the most up-to-date information that I could find. Another piece of information I found was that according to the UK Games Expo, back in 2018 in the UK, the gaming segment, the wargaming segment of the market was £350 million in the UK, and many sources have agreed that that has grown enormously during the pandemic lockdowns. You know, naturally people were going back to find things to keep themselves occupied. But the problem with using marketing data to try and determine the number of war games is that data just tells us what we've spent. It doesn't tell us how many individuals there are or how they're spending that money. So it very quickly became evident that market data tells us nothing about the individual distribution of wargamers. It just tells us about their spending habits, you know, where they're spending their money. Tabletop wargaming encompasses a massive range of genres, historical periods, settings and rule systems. Estimating the number of total wargamers from all those overlapping interests requires accounting for this diversity, and raw sales data just doesn't typically do this. So within this group of players, you'll have varied levels of engagement, from casual hobbyists through to really dedicated enthusiasts. And again, the market data doesn't tell you anything about that necessarily. Just the sort of stuff that I've been looking at online just tells you how much they've spent. You know, and it doesn't tell you whether they're spending across multiple genres. You know, so somebody might be interested in historical war games, but also play sci-fi and maybe board games. So they could be spending large amounts of money in different areas, but the raw sales data doesn't tell us what that distribution is. It just tells us how much money was spent on board games, on role-playing games, tabletop war games, science fiction games. You know, you can get that broad figure, but it's very hard to get really detailed sales analysis. I'm sure some exists out there, but certainly nothing that I could find. So if market data alone cannot come to an answer, maybe there are other methodologies that can be used to try and estimate the number of historical wargamers that there are. Now, I'm not the first wargamer to ask this question. I found an article by Eric the Shed back in 2013 where he did discuss this very subject, and he looked at the number of subscribers to wargamer forums and attendance at shows as a way of estimating numbers. As good a method as any other, excluding the Games Workshop 40k crowd, he eventually estimated the number of historical wargamers in the UK to be about 50,000 strong. So that's a starting figure. Somebody's worked out what they think is a reasonable number for the country. And at the time, that worked out about, I think he estimated something like 2 wargamers per 1,000 homes. So maybe the wargamers are a little bit closer than you think. And I'll link to the article in the description below, and thoroughly recommend reading through it. It's actually quite an interesting article, although maybe some of the data is a little bit out of date because it goes back quite a way. Other people have also done the same sort of thing, estimating based on the number of comments in threads and on forums and things like that. Again, estimating the number of gamers based on things like user numbers of the miniatures page and visitors to shows like Salute gives perhaps an indication, but it's not enough. Salute, for instance, can get up to between 5,000 and 10,000 visitors. The amount varies enormously, as we've seen in recent years. But is there any way of estimating how much of the historical wargaming community that represents? It's going to be very southern centric. You're going to have lots of wargamers that attend other shows further north. There's going to be overlap. So again, really difficult way of trying to estimate the number of gamers there are. Now, my estimation is based as much on anecdotal evidence as anything else. And again, it's going to be a guess. So most of the regional and club wargame shows I go to have a very historical bias, and gamer numbers can visit. Small shows can have between 500 and 1,000 visitors, maybe. Bigger shows like Salute, like I say, could be anything up to 10,000. But there's a large element of non-historical wargamers attending those shows, and again, it's really difficult to tell how many of those the people attending those shows are purely historical wargamers, or purely sci-fi wargamers, or purely role players, or whatever, and what overlap there is. So it's got to be very much of a guess. Now, the one set of data that I did find that did help a little bit was there was a survey on Goonhammer in 2022 where they estimated that the total worldwide Warhammer 40,000, the Games Workshop sci-fi game population would be about 2.4 million players worldwide. I'm not entirely sure on their methodology, but that was the figure that they come up with. And they also stated that 20% of that 2.4 million are probably are based in the UK. So that would equate to about 480,000 Warhammer 40k players in the UK. Now, based on that, if you was to say, again, elsewhere in various forums, I've seen a lot of mention of the fact that Warhammer Games Workshop makes up about 90% of the UK market for tabletop war games. Don't know how accurate that is, but if that's true, and you use that based on that figure of 480,000, that would give you about 48,000 UK historical wargamers, which actually is pretty close to what Eric Shed was estimating some time back. Again, wildly inaccurate, probably too many assumptions built in that figure, but the fact that two different people have come to the same sort of roughly the same number. So my tentative answer to my initial question is I think there are probably about 50,000 historical wargamers in the UK right now. So as usual, I want to ask you, what do you think? What methodology would you use? Do you have any better data than I've managed to find? Can you help answer that question? How many historical wargamers are there in the UK? Also, is it a completely pointless question? It's just one of those rabbit holes that I went down. I started doing a bit of reading over the last few weeks, and I'll get to the last few weeks in a minute. and it was just one of those things that just sort of obsessed me a little bit, and I'm not entirely sure I came up with an answer that I'm happy with, but it's as good as I'm going to get. So I'd love to hear your opinions, your views, any information that you might have that might help clarify the matter. So now I'm going to move on to a hobby update. There hasn't been a lot of hobby going on. As many of you will know from my Facebook posts and posts that I put on the community tab of this channel, I've been pretty much out of action for the last couple of weeks due to a gammy leg. Basically, I went on holiday, I got cellulitis, which is a skin infection, spreads incredibly fast, does an enormous amount of skin damage. I'm still in a lot of pain. Sitting up doing this video, for instance, is, it's going to take me about 30 minutes to set everything up and do the video, and that's about it for the day. The rest of the day I'm going to be laid on my back because it just hurts too much. I have to keep my leg as elevated as I can. So you can imagine virtually no hobby activity has occurred at all. I mean, I wanted to work on, I'm doing a video about making some rivers for 6mm. I'm 95% finished the video, and I just need to finish the project so I can take some final photographs for the video, and that's the whole project's on hold until I can sit at my painting desk for any reasonable length of time. I've done a little bit of reading, been listening to a few podcasts, but other than that, no hobby activity whatsoever. I mean, for the first week or so of this illness, I was completely out of it. I had a complete brain fog. I don't know whether that was the infection or whether it was the high dose of antibiotics I was on, but I just couldn't concentrate on anything. And I've watched more TV in the last 2 weeks than I've done in probably the last 2 years. It's driven me nuts because I fucking hate it. But unfortunately, that's about all I can do. I'm finally getting to a point where I can sit up and do things like this video for a short period of time. But I certainly ain't going to be spending any length of time sat at my painting desk doing things. I'm signed off for work for I was on holiday for a week, I've been off for another week, I've signed off for another 2 weeks. I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to go back to work then. I can barely walk, let alone drive. And like I say, sitting up and sitting at a desk and doing anything. So I'm trying to catch up on some magazines, read some hobby magazines, keep up a little bit more time spent keeping up with social media and just reading other people's stuff, and making some notes and things for future videos. But really, that's about it as far as the hobby is concerned at the moment, and I'm afraid it's just going to have to be, that's just the way it's going to have to be, because I just can't spend any length of time doing much. So apologies that my hobby update is pretty much empty. Having first week trying out the new format, and I haven't really got a lot to say, unfortunately. But it is what it is. But thank you everyone that's commented on both my channel and on the Facebook page, sending their best wishes, and I really do appreciate it. It's been a rough couple of weeks, and I'm not completely out of the woods yet. But thank you all for your kind words. It does cheered me up during what's been a pretty rough couple of weeks. But I have to say this. My wife's been absolutely fantastic, running around after me because I can't get up. Anyone who's had cellulitis will know how painful it is when you try and put your leg to the ground. The pain just sort of crescendos, and you just can't do anything. And all you want to do is, if you're going to the toilet or having a shower, all you want to do is rush back to getting your leg back up in the air again, getting the pain eases off. So like I say, I've spent most of the last, or pretty much all of the last 2 weeks, horizontal with my leg in the air, which isn't conducive to doing hobby activities of any kind. It's not even easy to use a computer or anything like that. So apologies for a lack of hobby activity. So that's it for this week. As always, please leave your comments and opinions, particularly about the talking point, in the comments below. And thank you everyone that's been submitting questions and ideas for these Sunday videos, topics, talking points to talk about. I've got a load of ideas, and I've been made the copies of all those questions, and I've been started thinking about a few, bashing them out into some sort of a script. for future videos. So thank you very much. That's been really really useful, and certainly I'll make great use of those questions. So if I don't get around to yours immediately, I will do eventually. I've got them all. I've been collecting all the comments and the questions, and started fleshing them out a little bit, and eventually at some point, maybe weeks away, but at some point I will get around to answering your questions if I'm able to. So as always, if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share, and please hit the bell notification icon if you want to keep up to date with my weekly videos. So until next week, look after yourself, keep gaming if you're able, and of course keep rolling high.